Hey there, hope you're doing well. Welcome to Snowpal's Polyglot Software Development Podcast. It's been a while. We've been busy with a number of other things, but I just want to get back to uh, recording a podcast and keeping this going. So apologies for folks who are watching or listening to us, but haven't seen any in the last couple of months. It's just we've been working on a number of different things. So I haven't had a chance to actually do this. Um, you know, Once we get into the groove, hopefully we can keep this going at regular intervals. In today's podcast, we're going to take a look at some changes we made recently. Our mobile app is built on Flutter, as you know, and Flutter has upgrades all the time. In the last couple of months, we've been working on other things like APIs and whatnot. So we haven't worked all that much on the mobile app, so we didn't do any upgrades. The problem is when you don't do an upgrade for like 4 to 6 weeks, and if there are a couple of versions of upgrades, you get into dependency issues and whatnot. So it's always better to actually keep it consistent. That said, it's not always possible if you're a team that actually owns several different products. Anyway, so there was a recent upgrade, and sometimes it has breaking changes actually all the time when it comes to Flutter. We love Flutter as a framework, but it comes with its set of nuances, if you know what I mean. So this last upgrade was a little bit interesting, and I want to share. It's not entirely unique because we've run into issues like this with upgrades in the past. For what it's worth, there was a different type of challenge this time, and I actually want to share that with you. So let me share my screen. I'm going to share my entire desktop. And then we go, let's look at the actual, let's go back. We made a number of changes, a fair bit of changes in the last PR. We haven't yet pushed that. The team is working on deploying that to publishing into the app and Play stores. So this is, I'm just sharing it with you, some of these changes before you might actually see it there. And some of it actually might be transparent to you, to be honest. So the first thing is, when you do a Flutter upgrade, I just did one more. We are on the latest version, which is 3.22.3. But what I want to talk about is the previous minor version. I think it was like 3.22.2, if I'm not wrong. Since the version prior to that was, we hadn't upgraded in like 6 weeks or so, a number of dependencies had changed. And, the simplest thing to do, let me see if I can pull up the commands here. Let me move this out of the way. Okay, so if you do the Flutter pub upgrade, it's going to update all of your dependencies. Once you do a Flutter upgrade and pick up the latest version, and then you want to update your dependencies, that's in pubspec.yaml. Now, if you don't want to update independent dependencies, most of the time we just pick the one that we need or incrementally update it. But the easier option is if you actually want to update everything, all of your dependencies, and then just take a look at what's actually going on in terms of other breaking changes, dependencies, errors. When you go to the data analysis on your IDE, how are you doing this? Like if I go to problems, you want to see this be clean, no errors and no warnings. Now, agreed, some of you might be okay with warnings because you may not be able to keep that clean all the time. We actually do our level best to keep it entirely void of errors and warnings. We don't always treat them any differently. So we did the update. It picked up all of the changes in pubspec.yaml. The problem is let me actually do a diff here. Show history. Not that one. Let's go to the previous changes. Yeah. You see here, this is a number of version changes, right? Version upgrades. Now, the first thing we did was did Flutter pub upgrade, and all the versions are updated, but hell broke loose, like it almost always does, because there were a number of dependencies that actually had breaking changes, and it is also cyclical, right? Because one of the dependencies that you're using might actually require a certain version, maybe a higher or lower version of another dependency, which you may be either referencing or using directly, or you might be using a different dependency that actually in turn uses the same common dependency. Hopefully, maybe I should draw this out, but hopefully you're able to imagine this. And there's a conflict between these dependencies. Now, if you were not using any third-party plugins, which surely is not going to be the case, you would handle this a certain way. But given that there would almost always be dependencies on third-party libraries and extensions, you have to account and handle this differently. So then the other approach we take is we actually do one by one. We start at the one that we actually do need, try to get that working, and then we go from top to bottom. We don't always get to keep all of these dependencies in sync with the latest and greatest changes as it's on um, pub.dev. That's very difficult, but we do it to the extent possible. But the last time, the one that we want to push to the app and Play stores, the most recent upgrade that actually has the latest changes, right? It has the latest changes. So let me go to the dev. Uh, the approach we took was we went didn't do the Flutter pop upgrade because we reset it and did all of our changes, and then went with one dependency after the other incrementally. Now, you want to make sure your dot analysis shows no warnings errors after you change one, and then you go to the next one and keep going. Or you can change a number of them at the same time. It just depends on what you're more comfortable doing. There's pros and cons with both approaches. We do we've used both of them almost interchangeably. But the most recent time, I think we updated almost all the versions and want to just get a sense of all the errors and warnings, and then we try to fix them. Now, let me pull up the actual one of the commits in the PR after the pub spec changes. When we did the updates, uh, where some of the changes? Yep, let's go to this file, course search widget dot dart. I mean, if you're not checked out our courses on our mobile app, I highly recommend that you do so. You can publish courses to monetize on our platform or consume our courses. They're super affordable. They're very, they're not theoretical, right? They're very pragmatic, practical courses sold for less than like $10 most of the time. So if you love engineering, you're going to find value in those courses most likely. Okay, so let's go here. Let's do a git show history. Let's see the changes. This last commit the last set of changes I worked on, so it's a few days ago, but I still remember it. So these were changes where there was a material state property, all class, and now it's like widget state property. What is it, like line number 62? Let's go to 62. Okay, and then if we do a git, the thing is, this is a third-party plugin. We can go find the dependency here. No, this is not. This is part of the Flutter package. So they changed it. If you looked at the most recent previous version, it was called something else, right? And it is a breaking change again. These are not like backward compatible changes. So the class name changed, and all that we had to do, because the rest of it did not change, so we didn't have to do anything more than just replace the name of the class. So that's simple enough for change, but you don't know it's going to be that way because, like I said, hell could break loose, and it almost always does. So that's one set of changes. What were the other changes? Oh yeah, the quill dependency. So on our mobile app, if you're if you've downloaded that, if not, please do so. We actually have support for rich text editing on our mobile app. We use quill as the extension, and that changes all the time. So if I go to quill here, Flutter quill. See the latest version. Oh, there is a version 10.01. Wow, even more current than the one we actually have. Uh, well, we're gonna have to see. Let's try this while we are here. Let's actually, okay, let's update to that version. And then let's do a Flutter pub get. Let's see if this breaks something. Fingers crossed. Okay, thankfully, there were no breaking changes there. So what I am going to do here is actually just go ahead and um, change. Okay, I'm going to say Updated. Flutter. Upgraded. Push that. Okay, so that's simple, right? You update the version, nothing changed. But the last one certainly was not like that. So let's go to look at these changes. Versions. I think the one we had before was like 960, if I remember correctly. Let's check it out. History. 9513. Oh, yeah. This is interesting. I thought we did this work recently, but the version shows is 9513. Um, do they have any? Oh, I was just looking at the change history. Let's see, change log. Okay, let's see, 9513. This is the version we were on, but um, let me go and tell you what it actually broke. So let's go back here. If you go to the rich text editor widget, okay, there were a fair bit of changes. So we have the quill toolbar and actually the quill editor, and the changes you see, the one on the left is what we had before. As you can tell, the one on the right, we won't go into the details of these changes, but from what you can tell, it's completely different, right? And one more time, not backward compatible. So the previous, I think the class names, the invocations, the usages, quite a bit changed. So what we had to do was map that. You don't want to change. You don't want to change your functionality, obviously, but you still need to upgrade the version. So what we have to typically do is try to map them. Sometimes they have a migration page that you can look at to see. Let's see, there we have an example. Um, change log. See, sometimes they have a migrations guide, and if there is one, hopefully, sometimes these providers publish it. Other times it's not there, and sometimes it's there. It doesn't work exactly as you expect. But if it's there and if it works, great. You make the changes, but at least you don't have to rethink. uh, and you can sort of follow suit by looking at the example. If not, you're going to actually have to look through that code because the documentation may or may not necessarily be there, at least to the level that you expect is going to help you. So here, if you look at it, we had, the quill toolbar. Let's look at that. It's returning a container. The child had a quill provider. Here, if you see, the child is there was a quill provider at that level, and then that has a child, which is a column, which is a toolbar. In this case, we have a child, which is a column and a toolbar simple, and the quill provider, I don't think they have the quill toolbar configuration. We have the simple toolbar configuration here. Yep, see the quill provider. Let's make sure I'm not missing something. We have the quill toolbar, which maps to this line here. We had to make some changes to the configurations. The controller. Yeah, I see you don't have the controller comes out of the quill. So we don't have the quill provider at all. And the configuration that was at that level is not there anymore. And then we have the quill simple toolbar configuration with the controller going inside of it. So that tells you that it's remarkably different. And that's where things get tricky. Now you need to do the upgrade because sometimes you can defer it, but you can only delay the inevitable to a certain extent. Yeah, I mean, you want to keep up to date for many reasons. One is you want to pick up the latest bug fixes and features and enhancements of these third-party extensions, so there's no point delaying the inevitable. And two, sometimes it's some other dependency. Maybe not the case with Quill, but in the earlier example where I mentioned, you have multiple dependencies and they both depend on a certain package, and that has changed. You will be left with no choice but to actually upgrade it. So in those cases, again, you either hope to you keep your fingers crossed, hope that there's no breaking changes, but there's bound to be breaking changes uh, frequently enough, at least when it comes to Flutter. You go look to see if there's migration. If they have a migration guide and if it speaks to what your changes are, then you're good. And those migration guides typically help come of use only when you're keeping up and you keep yourself up to date with the versions. Now, version, you're consistent. Every so often you upgrade the minor versions and then the major versions, then you'll be mostly all right. But let's say you come back after 6 weeks or 8 weeks, that's a long enough time in the world of Flutter or software. As we all know, things could have changed quite a bit. So the migration guide will obviously only speak to the most recent previous version and not the 6 versions prior. And that is going to make life really, really difficult. So again, this is something I want to share with you as an example of the type of challenges you will most likely run into. Okay, so that's one thing. The second change was um, it had to do with Facebook login. Now, with things with Facebook and Apple, things change all the time. There's something called limited login. Facebook limited login. Don't exactly know when this came into play. I have to say it was not too long ago. So this limited login is again if you're using Facebook login on your mobile apps, doesn't matter if it's Apple or iPhone or Android phones, there was certain permission that was needed earlier. But the Facebook has changed a number of things, so you can actually go. I don't have my app running on or the simulator running for me to show you. But if those permissions were uh, not enabled, right, for Facebook, I'm trying to think what those permissions are. Actually, I use my phone as the camera here, so I can't even take it out. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. And this was like a few days ago, so I'm forgetting. So in your privacy settings, if you go to limited login, let's actually see if they mention this. Facebook limited login on iPhone privacy settings. We're probably back on that same page. Yeah, in other words, you have to grant. We can look this up here. So we have Facebook login on our web app, mobile app, and everywhere else, and it works obviously. But the limited login is if you actually don't grant this permission. This is something that came into being fairly recently. Uh, it redirects you to limited. I think it's like limited dot. This one. You see, we made a change to endpoints for limited login. It is now accessible under limited.facebook.com, right? So it redirects, so it'll actually tell you on the phone that it's going to limited.facebook.com. And the way Facebook integration works, at least with the plugin that we're using and probably with everything else as well. So if we go to Facebook, let me go to this one here. Let's go, and then let's go to changelog. Actually, let's say, yeah, see breaking change recently. This is not too long ago. Added support for limited login. So if the user has not granted that, oh, that's the one I was looking for, advertiser tracking permission, right? So advertiser tracking needs to be enabled. If it's not enabled, the default, I don't think it'll be enabled. It's redirects you to the Facebook limited login where you're able to find out certain attributes and information about the user that's logging in, but not the whole nine yards. So it's just to tighten the security from a Facebook/Apple standpoint, right? I'm pretty sure it's enforced by Apple, so Facebook had a account for it, or vice versa. So if they didn't, I'm pretty sure it's coming from Apple. The advertiser tracking permission. So the login process will now enter a limited login mode. That's what we were looking at earlier. So this is a breaking change, like it says here, and we're using the plugin, and the plugin uses the Facebook SDK. Uh, so the so where it was not enabled, we had issues. When we picked up the version locally, obviously, right? We hadn't deployed or pushed it to production to the app and Play stores. But when we updated it, we noticed that without advertising tracking being enabled, we could not actually log in. It redirected to limited login, but then it failed because the whole integration is quite different. And then we looked at the actual plugin extension code, looked for limited login. Again, here's one of those examples where it actually says it's added support for limited login. And in all honesty, the plugin did make the change, right? So they did what they were supposed to do, or what they've claimed to have done. But that does not necessarily mean the rest of your pipeline workflow works. So we actually authenticate the user on the phone, right? And then we pass a token, like a Facebook auth code, to the server, which again validates that code by calling Facebook APIs, by using the Facebook SDK. And then we get more information about that user, right? Based on what Facebook's been able to share with us. That works, but not for limited login, because even though the authentication works successfully on the mobile app, and hopefully I'm still recording. Let me, yep, I am. Um, okay, so let me go back here. Yep, so the rest of the changes did not work. So the code was returned to us, but that auth code, it's too many words that says code. The actual authenticator auth code, that's the right way to call it, that we are passing to the server gets validated by our server side code. But the problem is that didn't work because things had changed, and what was returned what is returned as part of the limited login is actually not what is returned as part of the regular login. Now, how do you find that out? I mean, good luck. It was difficult to track this because we had to first figure out if this update was working from an SDK standpoint, from the Flutter SDK standpoint. So when we start debugging, we're like, okay, that seems to work as promised. So that means there's something else that changed, and we could not, again, there are things where you're not going to find documentation for everything. The whole purpose of, again, this podcast is us sharing challenges we run into, our learnings and experiences. So in the event you stumble into these issues, or you just have curiosity about just changes in software in general, you probably hopefully be better served by subscribing or following our podcast. The idea is to be pragmatic, so you show you something real. It's not hypothetical, it's not theory, it's not manufactured, and it's certainly not prepared, as you can tell, right? A lot of times I'm here, we're just sitting here and thinking together. So we were like, okay, it works on the client on the SDK, but it does not work on the server, which means we have to account for these changes. So now let me go to our API code that actually deals with this particular change in specifically, right? So we have code, there's authenticate. We get a piece of, we get the actual Facebook auth code, and then in the previous version of this code, let me go to, what is it, Facebook, get show history. So in the previous version, we actually call provider user profile. Let's go there. And then we essentially call, what is it, graph.facebook.com, right? There's a previous version, we just updated version 20, that URL. But let me go back to where I was at. We call that uh, through through the through this. Let me see. So this code comes from the mobile app, right, to the server. It goes through all the tiers of security, and then we get access token. We get the code, we use this URL, access token info, and then there's a certain structure that you need to pass. I mean, things have to be intact, picture perfect for it to work, which is true for anything. The reason I'm saying this here is even when there's a minor change with your structure of uh, the attribute that you're sending, it doesn't give you decent errors for you to tell what's going on. So you have to kind of, debug it yourself. Okay, so we pass the access token, and again, there's multiple ways of doing it. We used to pass the Facebook app ID; it's not required anymore. So long story short, you call. Let me go there. Access token. So once we get the code, we call this URL OAuth access token info to actually get the access token. Once we get the access token, we pass that access token, and then we figure out, we look up fields, email addresses, and whatnot, and then authenticate the user. This is the code that used to work, and it still does for the non-limited login scenario. But for the limited login scenario, what happens is, let's look for limited login. Right? So we get a certain error, and we figured that it means it's because a token it's because it's a limited login, the auth does not succeed. So in this case, we return like a response error, right, to the caller of this piece of code access token, and then we handle that error. As it turns out, if in the case of limited login, what Facebook does send you is actually a JWT token, very differently structured and very different from the code that they sent to you when it's not not limited login. Hopefully, I'm not too loud. I just realized that this mic is the third level. Sorry. Um, so that, as simple as it is, when you're looking at this thing here, we decode that token, find out using this algorithm, and then actually find out the user info. The rest of our code works just fine because we do the mapping in a fairly generic manner. But to get these two lines of code, or just to understand that what they're returning is actually a JW token and JWT token in the case of a limited login, that was not something that was easy to find. We actually, it's impossible. I think we had to dig through the code to even tell what was going on. So those are some of the challenges you are bound to run into. Now, again, if you think you could rely on ChatGPT, or maybe you can, I don't know, or Google or other tools out there, hopefully you can, but not a lot of times you cannot, because not everyone's running into the exact same issue that you're running into. And even if they did, maybe they haven't posted it. Maybe it's recent enough. I don't know. In any case, we didn't find any answers anywhere. And if we don't find answers in like 15, 20 minutes, we don't spend a lot more time trying to look for answers, because we assume that probably it's actually not there. A lot of times you look for it for like 4 hours and then realize there's an open PR in some other third-party extension, which is good to know, agreed, but it doesn't really help you, right? So you have to find your own solutions. And again, this is, it is in production, right? So there's a sense of urgency. So you want to get to the bottom of the problem as soon as you can, and then you can, publish it, and then you can take a little bit more time to figure out, okay, was that the best solution? Can we do something better? So anyways, that turned out to be a JWT token. So what we had to do is update the SDK, and then confirm that is in fact working as promised. Once we did that, we then try to debug our server side to make sure that the limited login also continues to work as does the regular login. So that's just one, just sharing a recent upgrade that we did. Let's go back here. Let me stop sharing. Okay. So hopefully that gives you, this podcast is just me coming back to podcast after I think a gap of a couple of months, if I'm not mistaken. But something we did recently, like a few days ago, but not like yesterday or day before, which is why I'm still a little bit rusty there, because I forgot what those changes were. We're working on something else currently as we speak. The next podcast probably is going to be something else. Who knows? It could be the API gateway. It could be our APIs on AWS. It could be the contract products, the subscription products we have on AWS Marketplace. Or it could be about a web app. Or it could be about something else entirely. Or some, I was just playing with some open AI changes recently. It's new to us. This is the year that we are actually getting our feet wet with everything that's going on, starting with CUDA from NVIDIA and things outside of CUDA as well. So I'll probably, my next podcast might most likely be that, just exploring all the things that are out there in the AI world, and maybe we can learn together. It's easier to do it that way than just do it otherwise. And maybe it gives you a bit more confidence that somebody who's done this a while also gets stuck a lot of times, and then you find your way out of that. It's just the way things work. Did something recently with the open AI, just playing with some examples as we get started, getting our feet wet, because one of the next things we are starting to work on is obviously, not obviously, but surely, and then contextually is going to have an AI dependency, either from the get-go or in version 2 of that release of that API. So we're just getting our feet wet, trying to understand what is out there. There's lots and lots of things going on, moving parts, lots of changes, some documentation, lots of documentation, or no documentation, a combination of all of this. So we're going to rely on our previous skills, experience, and the community out there to help us guide through this process. Please, provide the support that you can as well on LinkedIn or other places where when we reach out for help. With that, I think I'm going to end this podcast. Again, go to products.snowpal.com, check out all of our products. And if you're building new software or even updating existing software, and you don't want to reinvent the wheel, because to quote Henry Thoreau, the price of anything is the amount of life we exchange for it. So you can reinvent the wheel, build, versus buy or rent or lease, but it's just going to be a waste of time, especially because we have our APIs, number of them published and available and good to go on Marketplace, on AWS Marketplace and other API hubs as well. So definitely check it out. Let us know if you have any questions, and we can help you be a lot, just a little bit more successful than you might already be, and quicker for sure. Thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.